Okay, so welcome everyone to this panel discussion. Brave Musician has always wanted to have tough conversations in the moment, and I felt like this would be a good time to bring some people together and talk about just uncertainty and progress. So this panel discussion is entitled Now's the Time, Conversations on Progress and Uncertainty. And I brought in three of my favorite people to talk about this topic. And so if each one of you could introduce yourselves and what you do, that would be a great place to start. Let's start with Del.
All right. So my name is Lyren. I'm actually just about to retire from Bemidji State University, which is a university up in northern Minnesota. Small school. I've been there 22 years, and looking forward to being done and and moving on to new things. I've got, probably like Rahsaan, I've got some things up my sleeve a little bit. I also I'm a trumpet player, by the way, and I also own a business called DGL Artists. So I'll be moving from teaching at a university to artist management full time. So that's me.
Exciting. All right, Natalie, how about you?
Hi, I'm Natalie Boeynik. I am a bass player and I teach and am the jazz coordinator at University of North Carolina, Wilmington. I've been there, this is my 5th year. So have a great bunch of students there, and I get to teach a variety of different courses. And I'm really thankful Monica asked me to join this panel.
Awesome.
My name is Rahsaan Barber. I am a saxophonist and band leader when it comes to jazz. I've been splitting my time. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and returned there in 2005. And since then, I've been kind of active as a session musician and a touring musician and a band leader there. I've been splitting my time over the last year, completing doctoral study at the University of Memphis, and then still working out of Nashville.
Nice. Well, I'm so excited to talk to all of you. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Monica Shriver. I'm the co-founder of Brave Musician, but I also am a woodwind person, play saxophone, flute, and clarinet. And I'm a visual artist as well as an educator. I teach music history classes at a community college. And I'm in a weird transition of moving from Phoenix, Arizona to Nashville, Tennessee at some point. Not sure when they're gonna let me do that. So speaking of uncertainty, I feel like I'm definitely kind of in the middle of it right now. So let's just sort of start talking. How are each of you feeling right now?
Who wants to start?
Whoever wants to start.
You want me to start?
Sure.
Okay, sure. This whole topic of uncertainty right now is obviously very pertinent because everybody is kind of wondering what's next. Where's this going to go with the whole COVID-19 virus? All of us have lost gigs, all of us have lost work, and nobody knows when it's going to start up again. So it's tough. For me, with my university job, I'm still getting a paycheck until mid-May, so I'm lucky that way. But once mid-May hits, I'm relying on my DGL artist income, and there is none. There are no gigs. All the gigs have been canceled. So, speaking to the uncertainty of things, it's interesting times right now. But maybe we can get into this a little bit later. But I'm also trying to take a positive slant to everything and look at this as an opportunity to kind of reset and reinvent and move on into ways that are creative and hopefully inspiring to me and get some good positive things done that way. So that's kind of where I am right now.
We'll definitely explore more of that because I think I definitely have watched on different sides of the very far negative to the very positive, and kind of goes back and forth for me. So I definitely want to explore that more in the next question.
Yeah.
All right, who's next?
I'll jump in. I'm really trying to retool my day and my time. I'm also trying not to watch too much of the news. I heard a great NPR interview with Willie Nelson's son, and he has a lyric in a song about turn off the news, go plant a garden in one of his songs. And I am viewing this time period as someone who is fortunate, again, to have a teaching salary. So even though gigs have dried up for me personally, I have reliable income every month, and that's not going away anytime soon. So I try to avoid the news and not obsess over it because it does not help the situation. I want to be aware of things, but I'm far away from my family, my parents and my sister and niece, and I worry about them a lot. It's very hard being away from your close family and, you know, wonder about how they're doing and if everyone's really staying as safe as they can. And I worry about my students, some of them who are sheltering in place, who have lost their only university income as student workers and who aren't able to go back home for one reason or another. And so there's just a lot that I'm processing, but this is, like Del said, you know, perhaps an opportunity for some of us to kind of reset and shift our focus a little bit to some projects and things that we've neglected and not had the time or the space to do. So there's maybe a shiny side to this coin as well.
Yeah, I definitely can feel you with the worrying about students. There's a big part of me that just, and I'm in a unique situation of that I only see, because I teach music history classes, I only see my students for a semester. So I worry about them, but I don't have the same level of interaction, or even like, I mean, I've known them for 6 weeks, you know, but I still am constantly like hoping they're okay and worrying about them. And yeah, that can be hard.
And I'll add to that, and those are two incredible answers. If I had to say in one word, I'd say scrambled. I just feel like I'm trying to transition teaching a music theory class as part of my graduate assistantship duties at University of Memphis. I've got 31 freshmen in a music theory class, 6 of which I have not heard from in any way since school has started back. And it's one of those things where I'm, you know, absolutely aware that there's not only no knowledge, but certainly no control either of whatever situation they've gone back into, you know, as likely having vacated campus, you know. So then there's the scramble to learn new software and new programs to become an online teacher, and then also becoming an online student as well. And I've been really fortunate. I've got just some really great professors that are, you know, making me a better teacher in how they tackle the online educational format. But also there's this realization that there's a summer coming, and that summer has always been where those of us that, you know, other than my work at University of Memphis, I'm a freelancer. And so summer has always been the good time where the gigs were and it was nice out and people were getting out for concerts. And it's looking more and more like just about every band that I play with has at least canceled everything for the next 2 months. And so obviously we have no idea at this point how long this pandemic will last and what the immediate effects of it will be in this country. But there are so many questions that I realize on a minute-to-minute level I have no answer for. And so I would just say scrambled in that way. The one thing, you know, I feel fortunate because having been in that world on and off for 15 years, and actually at this point I think the majority of it having been without a sort of accompanying educational gig, I'm kind of used to that sense of scrambled. Not quite with this level of despair, you know. And so there's a certain sort of just a reliance, I think, spiritually that you learn in that sort of a profession. And so I feel comforted by that. But The other part of it is I think I just feel frustrated because obviously we're losing giants, particularly in the musical community. And the frustrating part is that we are not, the things that would normally happen, like, funerals and get-togethers, or even just going and sitting at someone's house and listening to Bill Withers live at Carnegie Hall. We're not traditionally able to do those things. So it feels not just that there's, a separation of work and those sorts of things, but also that we are kind of, this thing is affecting every level of life, including mourning and grief, and so, scrambled and frustrated, I think, is kind of where I find myself living. Hopefully I don't have to live here too long.
Yeah, it was interesting. One of the things when we were talking about heading into what is normally the good time to have gigs with the summer, in Phoenix, it's the opposite. February, March, April, May are the good times. And then June, July, and August, everything's dead. So we started that dead time early, and we don't have a lot to look forward to. Which is, I think, at least where I'm living, is kind of a challenge, because for us, June isn't going to make anything better. We're looking at September before things really start to get better. And so a lot of this time was the time when we saved up for summer. So for me, all of my gigs were designed to squirrel away enough money to survive the summer. And so that's part of my realization of oh, okay, now what do I do? Because I'm lucky too. I mean, I'm an adjunct at a college, so I still have a little bit of income coming in at least through May. But it's a little, I teach 2 classes, so it's kind of okay. But yeah, and it definitely, I have to agree with you, it is super frustrating to see a lot of loss and to really feel that within our community and not be able to share in it, in the same way. We've had to kind of figure out what that all means.
I can't imagine. I've heard a little bit about what's going on down in New Orleans, and I think it's going to get a lot worse very quickly, unfortunately. And man, my heart goes out to the Marsalis family and all the thousands of friends they must have down there that just can't even comfort each other, like Rahsaan said. And I'm sure it'll be months before they can have any kind of a tribute to Ellis, or a funeral or anything. And I don't know, it's a scary thought. It's a scary thought to die alone too. And I'm assuming that's what anyone in that situation with that virus, is worried about. I can't imagine. Sure. Yikes. Kind of a morbid thought, I know, but it's current.
No, and it's crazy to think about the fact that the 4 of us were all there in person just a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And just how much has really shifted since January.
Yeah.
Right. So, with that, what are some of the ways that each of you are processing or dealing with this uncertainty? Are you creating projects for yourself? Are you keeping busy? Are you binge watching Netflix and writing in journals? What are you doing to stay sane during this time?
I'll jump in first if that's cool. So I am doing none of those things. And this is part of it was an approach to, a response in a way to the first semester of my doctoral study. Those closest to me would probably suggest that I mildly lost my mind during that time. Just, trying to do a bunch of things. And fortunately, right around the time of our June conference in New Orleans, I started just trying to approach life with what has to happen. And then everything else happens if it facilitates what has to happen. And if it challenges what has to happen, then it doesn't have to happen. And it probably has to not happen. And so for me, I guess that's simplifying in a certain way. It's, in a normal, were we dealing with the loss of a giant like Alice Marsalis, normally I would, I might go get my horn. I might, make a post or post a video or something like that. But this is not a normal time. And so I think for me, I've had to adjust and really step out of the senses of shoulds that seem a little artificial in a way. And so, a couple of days ago, I got out and walked 10 miles. And it was one of those things that I literally had never done. But I just kind of stayed out there. And as long as my mind said, this is benefiting you, I stayed out there because, right now, and we kind of have to be a human first and maybe an artist second. And those of us that artist, and obviously, my passion for artistry is huge, but I think we all have to be flexible and open to what our own sanity needs, and sometimes that might mean, for me, as much as I love what I do, there's a certain space and a certain intensity that goes along with doing it at a certain level. And if I need to just stay a little bit shy of that place for a day, then that's just what I need, and what we're really talking about are like psychological issues and mental health issues. And, what are the pressures that artists put on themselves? I know a lot of artists that feel a pressure to kind of represent the times or speak to people's needs. And that's great. Unless it causes you to do something that threatens your own sort of the stability of your mental perch, So for me, it's a different sort of time, and that might mean that where I would normally, get off the phone with my parents after about 15 minutes on FaceTime, I now find myself, sticking on for an hour, and that's certainly, I was joking saying that, I've gotten it down to pretty much there's like one thing every day that has to happen, which is never the reality of a musician, or an educator or, just about anybody. But for me, and just kind of moving forward and keeping my own sanity, it actually means not taking on too much. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I'm just lazy. That could be it.
No, I don't think so.
I'm trying to avoid the temptation of watching way too much Netflix or Amazon Prime. I do spend a decent amount of time outside, have a beautiful neighborhood to walk around in, and a dog that loves to go out. So, to have that reason to get out of the house 3, sometimes 4 times a day is great. If I'm not working on preparing videos or lectures or grading, because some of that stuff doesn't really go away, or giving lessons online, I'll probably go outside, try to read, hang out by the pool, or work on my tiny herb garden that I'm trying to get going this spring, because we don't really know how long this is going to last. We're fortunate in North Carolina. We've had some gorgeous weather. I think it would be very different to be stuck in the house if it were raining and terrible and cold every day. But we've had some beautiful weather, so I'm trying to take advantage of that while still being mindful of the risk that is carried by being outside. I mean, I'm grateful to not be in a densely populated area where it's risky hugely risky to be out on the sidewalk. I find myself checking in with friends and family more often, and just like Rahsaan said, for longer periods of time. So rather than just a short text back and forth just to check in, sometimes the text conversations can go for a while. And, I'm calling my folks and my sister every day because we know how this virus attacks people, and how suddenly someone can be fine and then the next day they're not. And so to now be living in an era where none of us can take it for granted that we're going to be feeling great the day after tomorrow, and that our loved ones are going to be feeling great because this virus, we are finding it's preying on our worst fears, which is a loved one going into the hospital and you may never see them again. And it's hard for me to think that when I went back home to Indiana for spring break for 3 days, there's a chance that some of the people, the loved ones that I saw, there's a chance that I might not ever see them again, and that's very hard. But like I said earlier, I'm taking this time and trying some new things. Like a lot of people, I guess, taking up bread baking is a thing, because now I actually have the time to work on that. So trying some new things, and although I don't feel creative at all, I'm still practicing and trying to write music. And when that doesn't happen, the least I can do is listen. So just trying to explore some new music and be ready for when I am feeling better and more prepared to go out and actually start writing again.
Yeah, I think we should definitely talk about that, not feeling creative, because I think, social media was never real to begin with. But I think right now, I don't know about you, but a lot of my friends are creating a lot of amazing things. And it's so wonderful to see, but at the same time, I think, what's wrong with me? Why can't I create something wonderful? And so I think that sort of pressure to create, and that to be creative, I think it's worth kind of exploring that concept too.
Don't you feel like this conversation is a creative act?
Absolutely. Yes, I do.
Good.
Yes, but but let me preface that with, if somebody saw, oh, look, Monica created something on Brave Musician, she must be doing fine, that wouldn't be true. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we as musicians have had a unique perspective that understands that creative people very often are not fine, even in times not of a pandemic. Yeah, they may struggle with mental health or all sorts of things in times that are normal. And so, but I do understand that it can be tricky that as we use whatever platforms are before us and communicate artistically, it certainly can be construed as an image of fineness or an image of everything being okay,
Right.
I think it's important to remember that everybody is different, right? Everybody responds differently to any sort of situation. For me, I almost change daily. I wake up some days and I just think, man, I am so ready to go today, and I'll have a great day. Then the next day I'll wake up and I'll just think, all I want to do is just drink coffee and just like sit there and watch a Netflix show or something today. And I don't know, it's just, I feel like a little bit manic in a way in that respect, because normally I'm when the world is in a normal kind of straight ahead kind of form, I'm usually really on the task almost every day. That's just kind of the person I am. I'm kind of a type A personality where I just work, and then maybe play a little bit at the end of the day. But it's been different for me lately, and I guess also we're in kind of a transition period personally, because quitting my job up there, retiring or whatever, we moved 6 months ago to Minneapolis. We're living in a kind of medium-sized 2-bedroom condo right now, and we want to buy a house, but obviously that's not going to happen probably for another year or so. So, talk about being cooped up a little bit. Yeah, I've been feeling kind of cooped up and a little helpless, and taking a lot of walks, like all the rest of you too. My wife and I are out at least twice a day and probably walking 5, 6 miles a day, which is great. You know, great exercise. It's great for the mind, great for mental health, and it does help rejuvenate me and probably most people, I would think. Getting outside and gardening, like Natalie said, and anything like that is fantastic. So.
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling the same thing as you. My plan, of course, had been to come back from spring break, finish out the semester, say goodbye to everyone. I had all my gigs, you know, my last gigs in Phoenix, and then I was going to move to Nashville. And now, like, I'm still packing up my house, but it's been so hard for me to like just do all of that because the transition is so unknown. Like, I had a plan, I had dates, and now like I don't. You know, people are like, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I honestly have no idea. And so it's very weird to pack up a house with like unknown, you know, that's been really, really strange for me, of not really knowing where my stuff goes, not, you know, taking my things off the walls, and that change in environment as well. And figuring out, okay, I'm not cooped up inside, everything's changing, but where's it changing to? I have no idea. You know, and looking for a place to live in a new city, like that's not doing that right now either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you found that part of life, that just keeping yourself in some way sane or leveled off, has had a direct impact on the notion of progress as an artist?
Oh, wow. So, okay, when this whole thing first happened, all I thought about was the future. I was like, okay, I'm moving to Nashville. I'm going to get my website going. I'm going to do this. I had all of my like future plans figured out, and I sort of abandoned the present, which worked for about 3 weeks before the present was like, oh no, you have to deal with this. Like, you can't look at the future. You can't, you know, none of that is even, you know, guaranteed. So now, pretty much this week, I was like, I have to deal with the present. I have to deal with being a teacher and finishing out the last 5 weeks of my class. I have to deal with packing my house and figuring out what to get rid of and what to keep. For me, creativity has been this, I haven't really practiced. Like, I've played a little, but I haven't practiced. I have no sense of routine. One morning I'll wake up at 7:30 in the morning, the next morning it's noon. Like, just, it's, when you were talking about being kind of manic, like, I could totally appreciate that, Del. Like, it's weird. It's a weird thing. So progress to me, I think I'm living far more in the moment now than I am thinking about, you know, what's going to happen in 3 months or 6 months. Although I still really want to think about the future. So it's a weird place to be in.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Monica.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are things normally at this time in the semester, my jazz festival, well, that got canceled. Jazz Girls Day in North Carolina, everything got canceled. Spring is our heavy time in the jazz world, at least for, in colleges. So normally now I'd be planning ahead and talking to my potential artists for next academic year. I can't, in good faith, do that right now. Yeah. So much is up in the air. And I know so many of these artists that I would approach, they've lost everything for the foreseeable future. And to then try to look ahead to, October, November, or let alone next spring, just doesn't even seem practical or possible. And so really, for the first time since I started teaching, I'm not trying to plan the future. And it's a very unsettling thing because we very much operate on deadlines and get your people booked and here's your budget and all of these things. And it's completely disruptive because I love to work ahead. I like to be organized and have all my ducks in a row so that by the time I leave the building in May and grades are turned in, I don't have to worry about it, you know, until September. That's just not going to happen. And so I'm now trying to, like you said, be more in the moment, because looking too far in the future just is not practical. And right now it feels like a waste of time to some extent, because there are more urgent things to be addressed. And it just kind of, it seems challenging just given the fact that we don't really know what this curve is going to be like or how long it's going to extend. And so I'm trying to kind of learn how to embrace the present a bit more rather than always planning ahead, and trying to, I guess we could all afford to grant ourselves some grace and forgiveness that this is new territory, and to try to maintain a sense of normalcy when there is nothing normal about what's going on is probably not the most attainable thing. And so to grant yourself, for us to grant ourselves some grace and forgiveness, and that we're going to make errors, we're going to figure it out. But for me, I guess in North Carolina, this is really the first week really of shelter in place. My workplace didn't shut down. Campus didn't close down for faculty and staff until a week ago. So, you know, I've not been at it as long as some of my colleagues in other states, but it's a challenge. And I think it's going to take a couple weeks for a lot of us to figure it out and get comfortable with the present, if you want to call it the new normal. I don't want to call it that, but that seems to be what it is, really.
Yeah, I think, and you know, Rahsaan, you mentioned like being human, and I think that's, you know, when we talk about, for me, like eating every day, it's like remembering to do that, remembering to go for that walk, to think about, you know, what does it mean to be healthy, to boost my immune system? Am I eating vegetables and not, you know, Oreos? And and that's been a really good thing to remind that we're human, you know, and that even as artists, like we've got to take care of those human aspects of ourselves as well.
Yeah. And I've got a question for Natalie, if that's cool. Because Natalie, you were saying that you've found yourself practicing. Are you practicing like improvisational things, etudes? Is there something, you know, is there something that you're getting from that also kind of helps get through this?
Well, it is one thing that I can control to an extent. You know, it's rewarding in the same way that doing laundry is. I like doing laundry because at the end, you have something to show for it. You know, you got the stack of stuff, you get to put it away, fresh clothes for the week. So when I had to pack up my office, I had to very quickly, you know, figure out what books am I going to use for my teaching? What things do I want to have on hand to practice? I was going to do a recital, but then the hurricane blew that out of the water last year. So I'm going to try again. I already have planned a faculty recital, so I brought home my music. It's a mix of tango, some classical stuff, and then whatever jazz arrangements I do. So I brought home etude books. A lot of the stuff I'm using is stuff that I'm gonna double up and use in my lessons. And so I'm just trying to slow down and actually work on some things that I don't normally spend time working on. And so for me, that's classical. It's playing with the bow. All of my students are jazz students, and almost all the playing that I do, professionally and otherwise, it's on, you know, it's playing jazz or Latin or Brazilian stuff. And so to actually take out the etude books and work on vibrato and double stops and some of these techniques that you don't employ so much in jazz, I'm getting to do that. And then working on sight reading. I just brought home a big batch of bass books of various levels, and I'm just trying to sight read the heck out of stuff right now because it's fun. and it's still a skill that can always be refined. So, you know, I had initially kind of balked at the idea of putting stuff on social media. I've never really done it before. I don't care to. I've never been one to like just go out and play on Facebook, but it seems to be now maybe a way to keep myself motivated. So, you know, perhaps my students will see something from me appear on social media on occasion over the next few weeks, because normally I hate doing that. I would never do it. But right now, there's not much else to do to really interact and work with other musicians. So we'll just see.
Mm-hmm. You know what, I found myself over the past year with the move and the kind of slow transition into a new career, I found myself not listening to music anymore. And just over the past like 2 weeks, when all of this started to get serious, I started to put on recordings at home during the day, and I didn't realize how much I'd missed that. Wow. It was like, man, it just blew my mind how happy it made me to listen to, you know, like today I had Nicholas Payton's Place on, and it was just like, man, I love this album. Where's this been, you know, for the past year at least? And I've had so many other albums that I've put on like that, and it's been mood elevating, but it's also been rejuvenating and eye-opening in a way, because sometimes you get in such a routine and you know, the whole living in the moment kind of thing, you kind of forget to do that, and you forget about what's important, whether that's listening or playing music or family or walks and exercise, whatever. It's really easy to get wrapped up in the negativity of the world, especially right now. And if you can find something that's positive for you, whatever that is, I think it's really important to latch on to that these days.
Yeah, I definitely, I've been doing a lot of the listening on my walks. I'll do either like put on an album and, you know, walk for an hour or whatever, 40 minutes, or podcasts. I've been listening to a lot of positive podcasts that are about either like creation or, you know, mental health or creativity or whatever. And just to kind of know that people are talking about those sorts of things, which has been really good. So, yeah.
Yeah, great.
I think one thing I miss the most is just playing with people.
It's hard.
That, yeah. It feels like an appendage, you know, it's something that we just miss, because making, you know, practicing is one thing, even playing for enjoyment alone is one thing, but for all of us, I know there's such a spirit of collaboration, and so much of the joy of being a musician comes from creating with others, and to not be able to do that, it's hard.
Yeah, I'm feeling that definitely with my music, especially, is so interactive. All of my original music, and it is so dependent on the people that are in the room at the time. And to just like kind of make music with myself is, I should probably spend more time doing it, just because I would probably get to know myself better. But I do really miss that interaction of, well, what does somebody else think when they see this progression, or, you know, see this painting or whatever. And of course I had that huge idea that I was gonna, you know, do the solo, and I'm going to, but I realized that was like 2 weeks ago that I put that out. And it was like all that ambition, and then it was like I don't know, it just abruptly hit me that I was like, oh no. I think part of it too is putting my classes online. I severely underestimated the time that would take. Like severely. That's the other thing I'm realizing with all this time is moving really funny for me. Like when it kind of had a rhythm for a while. I knew how long days lasted. I knew how much time I had to do things. And now I feel like that has all gone out the window. Like something that used to take me an hour, it takes me 5. And what used to take me 5 takes me like 2 minutes. Like March felt like forever. Have you guys experienced that too, with time just being super weird?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and for me, it comes down to structure, and or the lack thereof, is this me is creating from a lot of us, you know, and and so that's been the entire challenge, is that, you know, especially as educators, we've had a push at University of Memphis to become asynchronous educators, and so that means that you know, no assignment, nothing happens, of course, like, you know, where 31 people are all doing it at the same time. But then, you know, that takes all the structure away from our end of it as well. And so for me, it's like there was a point where I was like, okay, I'm going to get this first assignment, this first week of assignments out to students. And I think that happened about 4.5 days after I thought it was going to happen. Because between, you know, having to learn and kind of get acquainted with all the software ahead of time, you know, and then just also this weird, you know, passage of time and all of the other things that are going on in our head during a time like this, you know. It's also a little trippy just because for many musicians, music is how we deal with things like this. And so when that social interaction goes away, or even if we maintain it, it certainly doesn't, you know, you don't hear the overtones in the room. You know what I mean? It's like I can add saxophone to a track and fly it out to a friend of mine, and we've created something together, but it in many ways doesn't actually feed the thing in me that is experiential that I'm looking for, or, you know, want to take part in. And so, you know, I think there's that, and then realizing that just because it maybe doesn't water that particular soil, it doesn't mean you haven't done anything, you know. And the more motivating thing for me, you know, and I'm kind of like Natalie when it comes to social media to some extent. I've never been the player that, you know, got on every week and put out, you know, a minute long clip or something like that. But when I read the feedback from people that see those sorts of collaborations or appreciate, you know, those things, you know, that's kind of what compels me and kind of makes me still feel connected to, in some way, the purpose of music in that way, you know. The other thing is we should probably talk about it as an alternative income stream, because it seems like there are a lot of people out there doing video conferencing and concerts and things like that. And it does seem like the friends of mine that were already kind of pointed in that direction or engaging people in that way, have certainly, you know, taking the reins and are running hard with that stuff, which is awesome to see and eye-opening, I think, for those of us like myself that might feel like fossils when it comes to, you know, Facebook Live in my warm-up every morning or that kind of thing.
Well, and I think it's one of the things, if we can, you know, positive about income, is that I see a lot of direct payment to musicians. Like when we put out our Venmo or our PayPal, like that's not going through anything, that's going directly to us, which I think is an interesting thing, you know, is somebody like, oh, I loved that song you created, or I loved that warm up, or hey, I just like you as a person, have some money. Like it's a very different thing from us, like, please come to my show and pay this ticket, and then hopefully the, you know, getting a portion of the door. Like it's a whole different thing.
I think it'll be interesting to see what this in the end does to the gig economy as a whole, because I think there's been some attention paid to gig work, whether it's musicians, Uber drivers, whatever. But I think this is going to reveal, perhaps more than anything, the cracks and failures in the system. And the plight of musicians and artists and dancers and, you know, actors on Broadway. There's a huge swath of our population that relies on people going out and partaking in their services. And it will be fascinating to see, well, I say fascinating, it could be also devastating, to see what the end result is, and if there are changes, massive changes made to protect artists and gig economy workers, because this is probably bound to happen again. We're hopefully going to learn from this experience, but if it can happen now, it can and probably will happen again in our lifetime. So what then?
Right.
That's really...
Del, have you thought about that as your, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Natalie, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was finished.
I was just curious, Del, because, you know, you're definitely thinking about the gig economy, right? You're the person who's helping other musicians get work. What has been your thoughts at this time?
Yeah, it's scary, I gotta say. I agree with everything Natalie brought up there. It's just really hard to say where this is going to go. It's made me second guess my decision. Yeah, I'm it's scary to give up that university income, I tell you what. And I'm only 53. I'll be 54 in May, so it was a very early retirement. I could afford it when I did it. And now I'm not sure what's going to happen at this point. So
I feel a little bit of that, yeah.
Dude, I know I'm not alone too. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about it beyond that. It's just hard to predict. I sure hope the future is positive, and I don't know. It's easy to think. It's easy to think that it's not going to be, but I'd like to. I'm generally a pretty positive person, and I would like to think that the world's going to come together, you know, and everybody's going to see what we've missed in these past months with no live music, no live anything hardly, you know, other than what we do in our own living room. So yeah, I'm going to take a positive slant on it, and I'm going to say that I think the world is going to realize how important these things are to our society, and come together and embrace it. That's my hope.
That's beautiful. And that's, you know, that's something I'm definitely holding on to, because as somebody who teaches music history to non-music majors, right? One of the things I've always made them do is go see a live concert. And they hate it typically, but they come back from the experience usually having felt something they've never felt before. And I think that's huge, because I teach college. You know, if you get to be 20 and you've never had that feeling of what it's like to see a live performance, I don't think there's any way to emulate that. And I think as humans, I want to believe that we're going to want that when this is all over.
Yep.
Well, I think people are craving it now more than ever. I think so many take it for granted that you go to a bar, there's going to be some jazz in the background, or some rock band playing, and we've long taken that for granted. I mean, we've all played those gigs where you want to put a sign out at the restaurant that says "Shh, artists at work," because people are just talking over you, and you're really actually trying to play something interesting and do something with your music. So I would like to think also that people are going to realize just how much they do value the arts, and hopefully we will see, when this is over, people ramping up once they're recovered and putting in renewed effort to actually support, because we all know how terrible the streaming services are, just in terms of being any source of income. It just isn't for the vast majority of us. And the bread really comes from playing, getting out there, and being heard in a live setting. So hopefully we will see increased support for that, because people will realize this is what was missing for that 6 weeks, or those 2 to 3 months, however long. They'll hopefully come back out and support in even bigger numbers.
I agree, and I think they will.
Yeah. I also think too of all those parents who are at home with their kids for weeks on time, that those kids are probably getting a high level of creativity and arts. I don't know, my neighborhood, there's kids all around drawing all over sidewalks with the chalk. And I just think, oh my gosh, if these kids finally have time to be creative, finally have time to explore the arts, maybe we have a whole generation of people that'll grow up appreciating it differently.
In a way, a lot of this feels like we've kind of regressed back to like the 1950s. I mean, we take walks through our neighborhood too, and I've seen the same thing, you know, hopscotch on the sidewalks, and kids out playing soccer in the streets and stuff like that. And it's just like, man, I haven't seen this in years. Where'd this go? And it's kind of cool to see families, or like we took a walk at night the other night, and you can see, obviously, not that I'm a peeping Tom or anything, but you can see into people's houses as they're walking down the street. And my wife and I were looking in these windows, and you would see families sitting there playing cards. And I saw a father sitting on his couch reading a book to his two daughters. And there's a lot of stuff that I'm sure it happens. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I think right now it's happening a lot more. And that's a really good thing to see. That gives me hope in our society. And I think it goes back to what Natalie was saying too, is I think when it's all done, there could be some good things that come out of this, hopefully.
I think at the very least, a lot of us will have reevaluated priorities.
Yeah.
Because there's probably not going, in the end, there's not going to be a single person who's not affected in some way, shape, or form. And it's probably going to shake a lot of people and make us rethink our priorities and how we are living our lives, and taking care of those around us. If there's a lesson to be learned.
Yeah.
So are you all routine people? Have you created a routine to try and follow, or have you just kind of been flying one day at a time?
I'm a routine person, definitely, but I haven't been, you know, in the past month or so. It's routines have gone out the window, and it's kind of whatever I feel like doing at whatever particular moment. And that's actually working okay. And in some ways I kind of like it, you know. It's just very different from what I'm used to, but I like it.
I've always been kind of a jam-packed routine kind of person. And I feel like it's worked well for me in the past. And I feel like just as soon as I, feel like I'm ready to start being productive again, I'll get back to that kind of structure on some level. I'm fortunate that I don't feel like I've struggled to create that kind of structure when I needed to. But, very often there's just been a number of things on my plate that more or less dominated my time. And I just kind of got them done. But they kind of laid out a structure, whether it's, full-time student and then working on the weekends or something like that. There's a bit of consistency that creates a sense of routine. So not having that consistency at all, having a long list of tasks that need to be completed, that none of which have a fixed time to them, is very different. But I feel like, as soon as I kind of wrap my head around rejoining the ranks of the productive, which feels like it's coming into, we had our spring break, and I actually had a big job interview that miraculously happened during that time, even though most people, I think, would not have expected it to. And so it meant that when I got back from spring break, I actually had not gotten a break at all, and was kind of very much limping across the finish line in a certain way.
Piano and the bass together.
So I felt like when I got back here, it's just been, and then, this is one of the, other wild parts about this time is that my mother's birthday was March 28th, which was a big milestone birthday. I won't say that because she's probably going to watch this, but I won't say which one. But, and then, my twin brother and our birthdays were yesterday. And like, I literally have never had a birthday where I wasn't in the room with one other person the entire time. And so, those sorts of things, drive a certain sort of reflection and you know, it means that I'm going to be on my phone way more than, you know, someone of my particular personality would probably ever choose to be on their phone. But you know, I feel like once I feel like I'm coming out of that, coming out of that stretch of being back and getting myself situated to where tomorrow, probably even later tonight, I'll probably sit down and write out something of a routine. You know, for me, it's I also just didn't realize how tired I was, and it's maybe that's something for all of us as musicians and educators. They just kind of go and go and go. It seems to be kind of common is that you know, the first 3 days that, you know, I think of this shutdown, once I kind of got in place to where I could actually rest, I was stunned at how much I slept, and I thought, I wonder if I'm this tired all the time. I think I might be. So, you know, it's you know, for me, that whole schedule and routine will start with sleep and rest in that way. But I feel like I'm coming out of it. So it'll be, you know, when we talk again, we'll see if I was right or wrong about that.
Yeah, I've definitely not been a schedule person. I know how important people say routine is, and I just have never been able to really do that where I can get up at the same time every morning. I can go to bed at the same time every night. I've kind of in that aspect of like whatever needs to get done, I do. Like, and everything's like timeline based. But now that that's all shifted, it's even with teaching, like it used to be, okay, at least I had a grade every week. But now with the async, what is the word? Where it's not synchronized. Asynchronous. Yes. You know, they're going to be coming in at different times, and I'll be, you know, reacting and grading at different times. And so for me, I thought I needed to do a routine. I think there was probably like 4 days where I sat down. I'm like, all right, here's what I'm going to do every day, and here's how much time I'm going to spend doing it. And has not worked at all. So I'm kind of just embracing the chaos.
I have to, I think that's part of it. Embrace it.
I'm doing a lot of almost all of my jazz history class. It's asynchronously taught, but I am holding, I think over the course of whatever's left in the semester, a total of 5 in-person sessions where it's optional, except for the final exam. I do want them to actually check in live for the final, unless there's some extenuating circumstance. But for these other sessions, I'm recording them. But today we had our first one in a week and a half, and I had 21 out of 30 people were on the line. And so I thought that was really encouraging. And I do think the students appreciate that, even though these are not my music majors. There are a couple music majors in the class, but the vast majority are nursing or marine biology students. And so I was actually surprised and quite pleased at the number who did want to just, let's meet and have a quick check-in. And then we did our lecture today on politics, protest, and peace. And, you know, for those who couldn't join us, it's recorded. They get the link, and then they can watch it. And, you know, I'm collecting assignments on particular days. So I set that up so that I'm grading like a sane person, but also because they have a research project that's going to be due. And if I have them just turn stuff in whenever, some of them will actually not even necessarily get to the homework assignment or the journal entry that might actually help them with their paper on Lee Morgan. You know, so I did it when we relaunched, and I did a live session for the relaunch on the 23rd. I explained to them my logic behind the pacing of things, that they do have 48 hours to get stuff turned around once the assignment becomes available, but I'm not going to be just grading things willy-nilly whenever they want to submit them, because it really is to their benefit to do things in the order in which I'm presenting them and in a timely manner, so that they will have gotten the content to help them with their research papers. And I haven't gotten much pushback from the students. And it certainly helps me, you know, to stay on target. I'm a routine person. My routine is different now, but I had a week to figure it out, and the university kept the students away, but they did a lot of training. I had a week. There were some gen sessions that were offered, and then the university had some distance learning workshops that you could just tune into all week long. And so, and there were PowerPoints you could download from different offices on across campus, and tax support for your technology to make sure you had what you needed to take your stuff home. So I'm lucky that I've been very supported, and that I had a week of grace to prepare. And I pre-recorded a lot of my history classes, and I got all the syllabus, everything rewritten, but it took a lot of time. But I was fortunate that I had that week of, I was ignoring student emails, and I told them, I really cannot give you answers until I have it all figured out. Give me this week. I'll let you know when I see you on the 23rd and we relaunch this stuff. Because it was a complete reworking and re-envisioning how I'm going to deliver content. I do a lot of hands-on. When we study bossa and we do Latin jazz, I bring in all sorts of percussion. I have the students dancing and, doing swing dance moves. They think it's really silly to do the echo singing and call and response and clapping. But to now be delivering stuff from home where it's not so easy for me to get up and smoothly go over to the keyboard and chunk out these different ideas. I've had to really rethink my teaching, because I've always taken it for granted that, hey, I'll bring my bass across the hall. I can chunk out some stuff on the piano. I can, bring things into percussion. That's just not going to happen doing it from home. So it's still a big learning curve, but by the end, I'll have it figured out mostly. Maybe.
Yeah. And I think that's part of, all good teachers, we want to do well. Like, I know for me, my challenge with putting things online unexpectedly was that, oh, this isn't going to be as good. And so that's been really hard for me. I always feel more comfortable in person than I do online. I hate making videos. Like, I really hate making videos. So that's been like a hard thing for me to kind of get over as a teacher of like, no, there's some of the stuff you're going to have to do. In my school, thankfully, they gave us 2 weeks to work everything. So my classes don't actually start until this coming week on Monday, which has been both a blessing and a curse, because, you get too much time, you wait till the last minute. But I also lost 3 weeks of content time. So I had to figure out what to cut. Like, what isn't important, what can I leave out? And that's been a big challenge to figure out what to do.
Yeah, that's a painful thing, is feeling like knowing that your students are losing out. Yeah. But there's really virtually nothing you can do about it. You do your best, but knowing full well that there are going to be some things that just aren't going to happen. Now, I've learned, being in a hurricane zone, to build in, I call them synthesis days, because in the fall, we inevitably are going to lose unexpectedly, perhaps two lecture days. So I was fortunate that I already had a couple synthesis days built in, and they were supposed to do live presentations. So by reclaiming their class presentations, now they're just going to submit their PowerPoint with voiceover. I was actually able to take those presentation days and then turn them into content delivery. So that was fortunate, but there's just going to be so much stuff that they don't get. I know I'm an enthusiastic person when I get going. And that doesn't always come across so well, and it's in video. So that's just gonna be a challenge, but I don't know. I think my students are okay with it, because that's just the way it is. There's an acceptance and a reluctance to accept that.
So if any other parting thoughts? We've been talking for almost an hour now, which is kind of amazing. Um, do you have anything as we kind of think about this moment that we either want to document or make sure that we think about as we're moving forward? Anything to leave the people who check out this panel with?
Yeah, I've had some really good conversations, and I think the experiences of Dell and Natalie are seem to echo this too. But I've actually found myself getting in touch with, particularly there's a set of young musicians in Nashville that are, you know, really the lifeblood of the town, you know, but they have also been hit the hardest. And so I've kind of urged them to consider other paths, and in a lot of ways, or most often I should say, there's quite a few of them that in some ways turn their back on academia, or working in higher education is something that's maybe not for them. And I think, you know, most of us that are students, how we feel about the program we attended is how we feel about higher education. And so, if, you know, there's a lot of people that if they struggled in their own personal experience, then this isn't for me. But I think, you know, those of us that, you know, it's one of those things where there's a high amount of projection. I'll say it that way, and I totally get it. And there's a high amount of expense, as is often the case too. So I completely understand it. But I've just, you know, I've kind of urged, you know, I certainly, if I was, right now it's just me, you know, but I think if I was looking at, you know, young mouths that needed food and diapers and things like that, which I certainly aspire to have that one day, you know, this is the sort of experience that would kind of shake me up. And musicians, surprisingly, I feel like we get comfortable with the things we get comfortable with, and sometimes even this doesn't shake us out of our modes of thinking, you know. And so I've actually been picking the phone up and calling a lot of people. I've had just such a tremendous experience doing doctoral study here at University of Memphis. But for those of us that are, you know, there's a lot of us out there, and I'm certainly guilty of it at times myself, as far as considering, you know, making a transition into being a full-time educator at the collegiate level. But also just certification in general, because we have a society that is obsessed with it, like it or not. And so, you know, I've been just picking the phone up and just trying to say, you know, even if it's an online degree or something to that effect, which obviously I think there's about to be a lot more of those available here in the next 2 years. You know, I've been trying to broaden a few people's mindsets about what progress can look like and what progress can mean, because I think as a natural reaction, there's going to be so much offered online that it would almost seem like, you know, if you've got 6 hours free on a tour bus waiting on the gig to roll around, you can make a better use of that time, you know, if that's an affordable thing to do. Or even just, you know, for me, it felt in a ways like unplugging myself from the scene to come to Memphis and start doctoral study. And, you know, considering, I should say again, my experience is I've been very fortunate as a graduate assistant. There's a tuition remission program and a stipend that goes along with teaching my freshman music theory class. And so my experience is not everyone's experience, but for me personally, you know, I've gotten a lot of calls from people that said, man, you made the right decision before. It's like they're going, you were ahead of the curve, basically, that a lot of people are going to be looking to go back. And I know musicians that even as they would hear that a lot of people are going to be going, they go, oh, okay, well, if a lot of people, then it's not for me. And really, you know, I would just say, you know, there's a point where you have to take care of the human and the artist. And for me, that, you know, taking that sort of a step has turned out to be, I think, you know, a good one and a fortunate one for when I did.
Yeah, I mean, I have zero desire to go get my doctorate. We'll see, you know, what happens in the next 3 or 4 years. But just having the master's and knowing that I could teach college adjunct, and even with my community college, they're letting me keep teaching some classes online even as I move. Like, that's huge.
That's amazing.
That's a huge thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
To have that option at least.
Yeah.
And when we think about alternate revenue streams, that should be a consideration, you know, like alternate doesn't necessarily have to mean brand new as we sort of get through all of this.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I think one of my,
You just have to be creative.
I think one of my thoughts, especially as I was exiting the building, my school building, for the last time for who knows how long, I was thinking about the seniors, because I've been there and this is my 5th year. So this group of graduates is really the first class of music students, especially my jazz band and combo students, that I've known them all the way through. Like my first year of teaching, before they even got there, I was just figuring it out. But then they come in as freshmen. And so now here we are. I was so looking forward to their graduation and to getting to share in that step with them, and their families. And now graduation is postponed. Perhaps, hopefully it will happen in June or July. But I worry about these seniors in particular who are graduating, most of them with astronomical debt. We know that that is going to be an issue. We have students that are food insecure. Their shelter is insecure right now. And there's no, you know, they're not working in this. We rely a lot on the service industry here and tourism in this part of the country. And so a lot of these seniors are kind of really feeling like they're being launched into real life now, and it's extra terrifying. And so, you know, I think as educators, the more that we can do to just even check in with them, even if, you know, ensembles are done, we're not doing anything with our ensembles the rest of the semester, but just sending them a note and saying, you know, just wanted to check in, make sure you're doing okay. Let me know if there's anything you need, letter of recommendation. Let's talk. I can help you get your resume together. You know, just trying to get the seniors to think in positive ways about this early launch into real life, because it's terrifying. And I actually took for myself, an unprecedented step of friending students on Facebook that are actually current students.
Right.
Because for me, if they accept it, or if I accept it, you know, it's just a way of being accessible, so that the students don't feel like they have to send me a formal email saying, you know, Dr. B, I have a question about this. Nope, I want them to just be able to reach out, see a little snippet of my life and what normal looks like, but also just to be accessible, because normally my office door is open all day long unless I'm in conference, and now that door is virtually shut. And so the best I can do to be open to those students is to let them have access, and to also reach out to them so that they know and they feel comfortable in coming to me with a question about whatever. Right. So and
I love that, not just for students, but for all of us. Like, I think knowing that each other are available is huge right now, you know? So I love that you're doing that, Natalie.
Yeah. I miss my students. It's hard to not see them every day, and to get to make music with them, you know, when we're in ensemble. It's not just conducting the big band, it's creating music with them, and that is something I really, really miss.
So many teachers that are friends of mine have talked about feeling this great sense of disconnection to their purpose. And I think there's something that that teachers get from that craft that you know, I think parents are learning it as they try to become stay-at-home teachers. You know, but also it's, I know so many teachers that are struggling with this sense of disconnection from purpose, you know. And so, yeah, that's eye-opening, because it's something that honestly, engaging in social media with students is not really ever something that I would think about. But thanks for those comments, because it actually, you know, it presents me another lens to look at that sort of engagement.
Yeah. It's interesting when you talk about purpose. I have my favorite hockey podcast because I'm a big hockey fan. And of course, that was my release of, you know, when I didn't feel creative or I needed to escape, I would watch hockey, which of course that's not happening. So, but I still listen to the podcast. You're right. Basketball for you.
Yeah.
But I listened on my walk yesterday, and my favorite podcast had Michael, I think it's Jarvis on. They were talking about mental health, and one of the things that he has worked with, like coaches and high athletes, was finding your purpose. But he sort of framed it in, what is my purpose in this pandemic? And that like hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh. And I think maybe for teachers out there or even students out there, it's like, you don't have to find your life purpose right now. Just find what your purpose is in this moment. And, you know, it'll shift later. But that helped me so much to kind of figure out, like, okay, what is my purpose as an educator for the next 5 weeks? Because then it's done. You know, I'm an adjunct. Like, you know, what is my purpose as a musician for the next, you know, couple of days? What is my purpose as for Brave Musician? And kind of just think of it in smaller chunks. What is my purpose in this pandemic?
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit to what Natalie was saying, because you guys have talked a lot about teaching, and I'm on sabbatical this year, so it's been kind of a good thing and a bad thing to be on sabbatical this year, because I'm not going back, and so I have all these students that I may not ever see again, and it's been a bizarre thought for me. Some of the students that I recruited to the university, they're there, and I'm just going to be gone. But I am in the Minneapolis area. I'm teaching about 20 students that I was teaching at local high schools, and of course now that's transitioned to teaching the 20 students online, and it's very different. But you know, my purpose, and I think our purpose as teachers, is just to be an anchor for those kids, because man, I look at their eyes sometimes in these lessons, and you can tell they just are so confused, and they don't know which way is up at this point. The seniors, I'm talking about seniors in high school now, you know, they don't get a prom, they don't get the solo ensemble contest, they don't get the state finals for basketball, you know, and then they don't get graduation either. It's just like, okay, we just kind of float away and disappear, and then what? Go to college? We don't even know if there's going to be college in the fall. They just have no idea what's going on. So I have felt like in the online lessons, for me, a good bit of it has just been being consistent and being positive, and just being somebody that they can rely on, and maybe even talk to, you know, if they need to, and approach. You know, I haven't really given them my private contact information, other than I guess they have my cell phone number for some of the lessons we do on FaceTime. But I've told them, if you need to send me an email, you know, whatever, you or your parents, either one, can approach me at any time. And I kind of feel like in my position where I am work-wise right now, that's been my purpose more than anything, is just to kind of be an anchor for them.
Yeah, I love that. And I think sometimes we forget that if we help our community, whatever that looks like, then that helps the whole. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't have to go and save the whole world, but if we can save the people that we are in direct contact with, or, you know, we help one person, that makes this better. That makes what we're going through better.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? No? Is that a good place to stop?
Yeah, it's a great place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank all of you for doing this. I really, really appreciate you and everything that you're doing and being willing to talk candidly about what you're feeling and what you're doing. Maybe we can check in again and see if anything's changed or, you know, how we're all doing.
I
Yeah.
think that'd be great.
Be awesome. That would
Thanks
be
for putting this together, man. It's been great to talk with you all and
Yeah.
listen. I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. All right.